I've been a night nurse in the ICU for 7 years now. And let me tell you, it never gets less weird. The stuff I've seen would make most people walk out mid-shift and never look back. You'd think the constant noise from alarms, the occasional bodily fluids where they shouldn't be, or even the death that creeps quietly into the room would be enough to harden me. But nothing truly prepares you for everything. This place changes you. It teaches you to keep moving even when you're unsettled, even when something feels wrong. It was around 2 a.m., deep into a slow, eerie night. The whole world outside the hospital was asleep. But in the ICU, the machines kept beeping, patients moaned in half-sleep, and the cold fluorescent lights above flickered every so often, just enough to make you question your eyes. I was doing my usual rounds, restocking gloves, checking vitals, and going through each room methodically. That's when I happened to glance down the main hallway toward the ICU's entrance. And there she was, a little girl, no more than a year old, standing alone, right in front of the sliding glass doors. She was wearing a faded pink onesie with tiny yellow ducks on it. Her hair was wispy, barely growing in, and her face was pale under the glow of the lights. She wasn't crying. She wasn't making a sound, just standing there, completely still, staring straight ahead with wide, dark eyes. I froze. My first instinct was disbelief. What was a baby doing here? No adult in sight. No stroller. No nurse chasing after her. Just this quiet little girl standing in the most dangerous wing of the hospital like she belonged. We don't allow kids in the ICU. It's too risky. Too many infections. Their immune systems aren't strong enough to handle it. Naturally, I started walking toward her, thinking maybe, but as I moved closer, something changed. The air around me grew thick, like trying to breathe through syrup. The lights buzzed louder overhead, flickering more violently now, casting long, dancing shadows across the floor. I could hear my footsteps echo through the corridor. Too loud, too isolated, like the hospital had gone quiet except for me. I picked up my pace, and when I reached the entrance, she was gone, completely vanished. No sign of her anywhere. I turned left, then right, nothing. I checked the nearby rooms. Nothing. It was as if the hallway had swallowed her whole. My heart thudded in my chest. I felt stupid for reacting, but I knew what I saw. That child was there. I'm sure of it. I was just about to head back to ask my coworkers if they'd seen her too, when I heard it. A soft sound. A giggle. A baby's laugh. Light and fleeting, barely more than a whisper. I turned around sharply, scanning the hallway. Nothing. No movement. No sound now, but my own breath and the distant beeping of machines. That's when Susan, one of the senior nurses, came walking toward me. Her scrubs were wrinkled, and her hair pulled back in a loose, tired bun. She paused the moment she saw my face. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low. I saw a kid," I said, still trying to steady my voice. "A baby." She was just standing there, wearing a pink onesie. Then she disappeared. Susan didn't laugh. She didn't call me crazy. Instead, she just looked at me for a long moment and nodded. "You're not the first to see her," she said, "and you won't be the last." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What are you talking about?" She motioned for me to follow her, and we walked a few steps away from the patient rooms, out of earshot. "She's been seen here for years," Susan said softly. "Same thing every time. A little girl in a pink onesie, standing at the entrance. Doesn't say a word. Just stares. And then she's gone." I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing. Who is she? Did someone lose a kid here? "No one really knows," Susan replied. "But the story goes that years ago, a baby came through the ER. Sepsis. It was fast. The parents never got to say goodbye. Ever since then, nurses, doctors, even some patients have seen her. Always in the same place. And nobody does anything." "What can we do?" she said, shrugging, but not in a casual way. It was a sad shrug, the kind you give when you come to terms with something you can't change. There's no child to treat, no record of one missing. You just try not to think about it. Eventually, you learn to live with it. I didn't sleep well for days after that. I kept working, kept doing my job, but every time I passed that hallway, I glanced at the entrance, half expecting to see her standing there again. Those dark, watching eyes. That pink onesie. and the silence that followed. Maybe it was a ghost. Maybe it was just the product of stress, fatigue, and too many overnight shifts. But I know what I saw, and I'll never forget it. My name is Henry, and I'll never forget the day I met Peter. Some encounters stay with you forever, not because they were exciting or joyful, but because they shake something deep inside you. They make you question the world around you, and long after the moment has passed, they leave behind a cold, lingering shadow that refuses to fade. This happened during my return trip to the United States from Norway. I had been overseas for a few weeks on a work project and was more than ready to get home. What should have been a simple, quiet journey turned into something far more unsettling. I was sitting alone at the airport, just trying to pass the time before my flight boarded. The usual sounds filled the terminal, muffled announcements over the intercom, footsteps echoing against the tile floors, the low murmur of travelers chatting or arguing quietly over gates and delays. It was ordinary, familiar. Then he sat down next to me. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Airports are crowded. It's normal for people to share seating. But the man beside me was different. He looked to be around 30. Clean enough, well-kept even, black jacket, faded jeans, and sneakers that looked like they'd seen a few too many miles. His hair was dark and cropped short, and he had a thin beard that made him look older than he probably was. He smiled and introduced himself. "Peter," he said. There was something in the way he said it, too rehearsed, too polite. His smile reached his lips, but not his eyes. There was a quiet sharpness to him, something you wouldn't notice unless you were paying attention. He started with harmless small talk. Where I was headed, what I did for work, whether I liked Norway. I answered, trying to be polite. I didn't want to be rude, especially not to a fellow traveler. But as the conversation wore on, his questions took a turn. He asked how much money I made. He asked if I traveled alone, if anyone was waiting for me back home. I tried to laugh it off, answer vaguely, but he didn't stop. He kept asking, digging, as though he was pulling at threads until something unraveled. And the whole time, his gaze never left me, intense, almost predatory. When he asked if I consider myself wealthy, a warning bell went off in my mind. I told him no, that I lived modestly, hoping it would end the strange interrogation. But he just nodded slowly, like he didn't believe me, or maybe he didn't care. I started feeling cornered, trapped, like I had walked into a conversation that was never meant to be casual. Thankfully, the boarding call for our flight came over the speakers. I stood up quickly, grateful for the excuse to leave. I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. As I found my seat on the plane, my stomach dropped. Peter's seat wasn't far from mine, just 2 rows back on the opposite side of the aisle. He didn't say anything, but I could feel his presence behind me like static on my skin. The flight was uneventful. Too uneventful. I spent the hours staring out the window, trying to calm my nerves, trying not to imagine what Peter's deal was or why he seemed so interested in me. I figure I was just overthinking. Maybe he was just socially awkward. When the plane finally landed, I rushed off, weaving through the crowd as fast as I could. I just wanted to disappear into the flow of passengers and be done with him forever. But just as I was about to reach baggage claim, I heard it. "Hey, Henry!" I turned. Peter was behind me again, walking casually, that same weird smile stretched across his face. But this time, he was holding something. It was a gold watch. Sleek, expensive looking, probably worth a few $1,000s. He held it out toward me like he was offering it. "I took this from a guy on the plane," he said, as if he was telling me about the weather. He didn't even notice. I stared at the watch, and then at him, my heart pounding. He wasn't joking. There was no sign of remorse or humor in his voice, just a twisted sense of pride. Before I could speak, he leaned in closer. "Don't tell anyone," he whispered, voice suddenly flat and icy. "Or you'll be the next one." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My tongue felt heavy in my mouth, and my body was frozen. I gave a slight nod, more out of fear than agreement, and turned away. I pushed through the crowd, my mind racing, my hands trembling. I didn't stop walking until I was outside, on the curb, desperately looking for a taxi. I never saw Peter again after that, and I consider myself lucky. I don't know what his real intentions were. I don't know if he picked me randomly or if he had been watching me longer than I realized. But whatever he was planning, it wasn't good. That much was clear. To this day, I still think about Peter. I hear his voice in my head sometimes, casual, friendly, right before the threat. I wonder what would have happened if I'd said the wrong thing, if I had reacted differently, or if I hadn't left so quickly. I don't know who Peter really was, but I know what he made me feel, and that feeling hasn't gone away. It was July of 2019, and I was only 9 years old. Even now, I remember that day with eerie clarity, the kind of memory that clings to you, even when you try to forget. The sun poured through our living room, curtains, casting long, lazy shadows across the floor where I sat playing with my toy cars. Everything felt normal, calm, just another summer day. But that peace didn't last. My mom's phone rang in the kitchen. I could hear her voice, quiet and tense. Nothing like the usual cheerful tone she used when talking to her friends. I stopped playing and looked up. Something wasn't right. A few minutes later, she came into the room, kneeling in front of me. Her face looked pale and tight with worry. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "your dad's had an accident. He's in the hospital. I need to go see him." A cold lump formed in my chest. She tried to reassure me, said it wasn't too serious, but I could tell from her voice that something was wrong. Since I was too young to go with her, she decided to leave me with our neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. Now, Mrs. Jenkins was an old woman who lived alone in the house next door. I didn't know her well, but Mom said she was very kind and trustworthy. When we arrived, Mrs. Jenkins greeted us with a warm smile. She looked exactly like the kind of grandmother you'd expect from an old movie. Gray hair pulled into a tight bun, thick glasses perched on her nose, and a long floral dress that swished when she walked. Her home smelled like cinnamon and freshly baked cookies. Come in, she said in a soft, almost sing-song voice, gently guiding us into her house. Mom gave me a hug and whispered that everything would be okay. Then she left. Mrs. Jenkins led me to the living room and handed me a plate of warm cookies and some wrapped candies. I thanked her and sat on the couch, nibbling away while an old black-and-white movie played on the TV. Everything felt cozy at first, but soon I noticed something strange. Across the room was a door, just slightly ajar. It didn't seem like much, just another room in the house. But what struck me was that every so often, Mrs. Jenkins would quietly slip into that room. She'd stay there for a few minutes, then return without saying a word. She never told me what was in there. She didn't even mention it. Curiosity started to gnaw at me. Why was she going there so often? Who or what was in that room? At first, I convinced myself it was something innocent. Maybe she had a cat or a parrot she kept hidden away. But there were no animal sounds. No meowing, no chirping. Just silence. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. Trying to sound casual, I asked, "Mrs. Jenkins, is there someone in that room?" The warmth vanished from her face instantly. Her eyes narrowed. Her lips tightened. "There's no one in there," she said flatly. Her voice dropped, suddenly firm. "And you're to stay out of that room. Do you understand?" I nodded quickly. I didn't dare ask again. But the cozy feeling in her home was gone, replaced by something cold and uneasy. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Jenkins stood by the door, putting on her shoes. "I need to run to the market," she said, her tone sharp and brisk now. "Don't move. Don't touch anything." And she was gone. I sat there for a minute, my heart thudding in my chest. The house was so quiet, I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall and the faint creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. That door, the one she had warned me about, was only a few steps away. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. I crept toward the door, every inch of me screaming to turn back, but something stronger, curiosity, or maybe fear, kept me moving. With a trembling hand, I pushed it open. The room was dark. Heavy curtains blocked the sunlight. My eyes needed a moment to adjust. At first, I thought the room was empty. But then I saw him. A boy. He was lying on a bed in the corner, maybe 15 years old, his wrists and ankles tied to the bedposts with thick ropes. A cloth was wrapped around his mouth to silence him. His eyes locked onto mine, wide with terror, pleading. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I knew was I had to get out. I turned and ran, bursting through the front door and across the yard. I fumbled in my pocket for my mom's phone, which she had given me just in case. My fingers were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. When she answered, I could barely speak. He stammered. There's a boy. He's tied up in Mrs. Jenkins' house. She gasped. Stay outside. I'm calling the police right now. I sat on the porch, too scared to go anywhere, my eyes glued to the street. Minutes passed. Maybe it was 10. Maybe it was 30. It felt like forever. Then I saw the flashing lights. The police arrived, rushed into the house, and moments later, they carried the boy out. He was pale and frightened, but alive. Alive. I later learned that he had been missing for weeks. Posters had been up all over town, but no one had thought to check quiet, friendly Mrs. Jenkins' house. Why would they? She had no family, no criminal history, no reason for suspicion. She was arrested that afternoon. No one ever got a clear answer as to why she did it. She never spoke about it, never confessed. And to this day, nobody really knows how long the boy had been there, or if there were others before him. But I do know one thing. I'll never forget the look in his eyes when I opened that door. And I'll never again ignore a door that's slightly open.